Hi, Angela. How are you?
Hey, doing well, Camber. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So I'm excited to have you today because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about everything that we released in the first half of the year and kind of what we have coming down the pipeline for the rest of the year. And we had some really great stuff roll out, and I'm really excited about the rest of the year. So, before we get into that, though, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Give, just in case anyone watching is not familiar with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Angela, and I am the product owner, product manager at GiveWP. What that means is I'm the person who handles this product strategy for our team and plans the work for our developers. So I decide what features to build next and what improvements or enhancements to make to the product so that it best serves you.
Perfect. And how do you get the information that you need to like inform your decisions?
Primarily from direct customer feedback. We have a great community here at Give where a lot of our customers just freely share what types of features that they'd like to see created or what needs they have that are not being served yet. And we base a lot of our decisions on what we hear from all of our customers and potential users as well. I also stay in contact with you, of course, and customer success team, customer support, learn about the issues that people are facing or where they might not choose to use Give if they were initially checking us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Taken so many things into account for building that roadmap out. For anyone that is not familiar with me, I'm Camber. I'm the product marketing manager at GiveWP. I work closely with Angela to make sure that we're aligned on that strategy for the product, make sure that we're all kind of hearing the same things. And then it's also my job to make sure you know about the enhancements that we're making to the GiveWP product. So I am really excited for today, but as some quick housekeeping notes, this is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube and Facebook for a replay as soon as we're done here, and it will stay up forever. So don't feel like, oh, I got to rush and scramble and make notes. You don't have to. You can go back and rewatch it anytime that you want to. So that's really it. But the first thing I want to do is just recap Q1 and Q2. I want to say before we get into some of the key enhancements that we're going to cover, there were a ton of enhancements in Q1 and Q2. I'm going to drop some links in the chat. You can read about way more there, but we are going to cover a handful right now. So some of the enhancements I want to cover, Angela, are the events tickets block, which came out in beta, 2-panel layout, header images, all the changes to P2P, the time-based goals, and all the changes that we've made to visual donation form builder. So why don't we get started with event tickets? Why don't you just give us a little bit of an overview of that?
Yeah, so we understand that the giving landscape changes over time, and we're looking to ensure that our product accommodates modern types of giving. We know events are really big for nonprofit organizations and individuals alike, and that's just an area that we had not yet been accommodating. We don't have any event features. We were just a simple donation form, and so we're kind of looking to delve into that side of giving and I help people achieve their goals with events with a lot less manual work. So the idea behind this was to put out a really simple but essential new block for our forms that would allow you to offer tickets, either free or paid, on your form alongside donations. We got a lot of great feedback with that. We released it in beta because we knew it wasn't exactly where it needed to be, but we needed more feedback from customers to get it there. We had the initial ideas, a lot of requests in our customer feedback forum to kind of get us started, but like the direction that it needed to take was a little unclear. So, however, we have a really clear direction for that. We know that optional donations are key. I do want to mention that that's a little bit more challenging than you might think it. Our donation forms, our entire product is built around the idea of collecting a simple online monetary donation. It can be suited to other purposes, but it's not built for that. So something that could be a monetary transaction that's not a donation doesn't maybe count for tax exemption and or tax credits and things like that, or even maybe isn't a monetary donation at all. If tickets can be free and a donation is optional,
Right.
there's no money being changed hands there in any way. So that constitutes a significant change to our structure and our database that we're now organizing development plans around, and hopefully we'll have some updates coming soon to that.
Yeah. So when you're talking about how much more complicated it is because of like the exemptions and tax credits and what is considered a donation and what isn't, we're talking about things like, okay, is a registration fee for a, let's say, a walkathon, is that considered a tax deductible donation? Is part of it a tax deductible donation, but the part that goes towards your t-shirt not? Like, those are the questions that we're exploring and answering right now, right?
Absolutely. We're kind of paving the way for the future of giving, in that we want to let you make that choice, right?
Mhm.
We want you to be able to say this is or isn't tax deductible and have that, be reflected in the way that this is handled, that this transaction specifically is handled. We also understand that not everything is counted as a donation, right? A registration fee might not be considered a donation. You might not want that person to
Right.
receive typical donor emails and things
Right.
like that.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, cool. So let's move on to two panel and header images, which are only available in the visual donation form builder, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We recognize that in previous versions of our form editor, we've offered different
Mhm.
settings for each type of template that we've set up in there. So you usually get a featured image,
Right.
and that will display a certain way depending on your on the template that you've chosen. And then we only had a couple different formats for that, right?
Mhm.
So again, we're trying to update, trying to modernize, and give more options, but have those options be common or standard across the different layouts that we're offering for the forms.
Mhm.
Two panels super exciting because it's one of those where it's formatted a lot more like the different types of campaigns that you might see, where you have the title of the campaign and the image and the description on one side, and then you have like the donation option on the other.
Mhm.
And that's something that people have been asking for as well. So I'm really excited about that one. I'm really excited about the header images. And those do have an alt tag, by the way. I think
Hey,
that,
accessibility.
yes, we're trying to pay a lot more attention to
Yeah.
accessibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the two panel specifically too, that's set up in a multi-step format.
Yep, that's right. We mocked it up and found that when we have just the header image and title and things on one side, if there's
Mhm.
a particularly long form, let's say you need not only the initial donor information, but billing address and
Right. Or
a bunch of
t-shirt sizes or
right.
whatever.
It can get crazy long, and then you've got this like super lopsided
Yeah.
form. It's much easier for your donor to click through those steps as they
Mhm.
continue to see, the pertinent information on the other
Yeah.
side as well about what they're even donating to. So
Perfect. So P2P, we made a ton of changes across Q1 and Q2, including customizable campaigns, more customizable P2P campaigns, registration fees. So again, kind of falling in line with that events focused fundraising and the ability to be on multiple teams. So can you give us, can you extrapolate out on that a little bit for us?
absolutely. I mean, peer-to-peer, since its release, has been one of our most popular products.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because a lot of data shows that peer-to-peer campaigns are some of the most successful ways to
Mhm.
raise funds. So we wanted to pay a lot of attention to that and make sure that this actually suits the typical peer-to-peer needs. And one of those is typically like your color runs and
Yep.
like on-site activities or school fundraisers, where maybe you have different sports teams or
Mhm.
band, choir, things like that, or raising funds. And we ran into a couple different things with that. For one thing, registration fees are pretty critical when you've got overhead
Mhm.
costs. If you're offering t-shirts, stickers, lanyards, whatever you're offering to your participants to make them feel like they're part of the team, registration fees are key in being able to actually afford to do those
Yeah.
things. And then having fundraisers be able to join multiple teams aligns very well with the school fundraisers and things like that. Someone might belong to choir and band and want to raise funds for both of those teams.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go back to the customizable campaigns too a little bit. I know that a lot of the feedback that we were getting around campaign building and P2P was that it just there just wasn't the ability to make it as branded towards the organization or towards that particular campaign. So what specifics like did we add in and change? I know there's a block editor to make it so that we can make those, or they can make their campaigns a little bit more customized.
Absolutely. So even beyond branding, people just wanted to be able to move the content around on the page before it was enter these items and that's what you get. We spit out a page for you, and it's in whatever order it's in. That's all you get. And they wanted to be able to add other content to the page too, maybe video, other images. I mean, in order to enhance the campaign and really engage with your donors, that content is super important. So with WordPress, I mean, the easiest route there is to just accommodate the block editor, because you can add anything you want to that page using the block editor. You can move blocks around.
Any block that's available.
Yeah. And so we turned every single piece of our peer-to-peer campaign page into a block for you. So you can add it to other pages if you want it to show up on other pages. You can rearrange it on your campaign page. You can use the block editor to add more blocks with different content. You can just add anything that exists as a block to that page.
Yeah. That's so important, because really the power behind the peer-to-peer campaign is the network that people use. And so if they're not familiar with that organization, being able to have videos and pictures and more content and having it staged in such a way, that new people are going to understand everything is really, really crucial to peer-to-peer fundraising, because it really does rely on that like social aspect of fundraising.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So we also made some changes to the goal bar. One I want to mention just in case, it was more of a fix, I guess, than an enhancement, which is just that we made some changes so that the goal bars do not display recovered fees. So if you have fee recovery turned on previously, that goal bar would include those in your fundraising goals. We got a lot of feedback that people did not want them included. So we did make some changes to that. The one reason I want to note that is just because if you did update it and you saw your goals decrease, your progress decrease, that is why. But another change that we made to the goal bars was time-based goals.
Yep.
What is time-based goals?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that both of these things are visual builder forms only. So we did not change the way the other form editor actually works. So those goals are still tracked the same way they always have been. They do not have the additional settings. Speaking to the fee recovery a little bit, initially we just wanted to include all of the amounts, right? We don't want to make assumptions on your behalf, but we got resounding feedback that those recovered fees should not be included. And it makes sense, right? Yeah. So while we knew it would be a bit of a change and probably decrease some of the progress toward goals, we felt like that was the right move to exclude.
It's a little bit more accurate.
Right. Definitely better for tracking in that way, because technically if you've lost those fees to, transaction fees from Stripe or PayPal or whatever payment provider, they're not contributing to your goal there. But yeah, jumping over to time-based goal setting, since you asked me what those were. We found a lot of people, they want to be able to track progress toward goals on the same donation form over a period of time. Maybe it's over a several day holiday, or maybe it's month to month. And what people were asking for was a reset, just a reset button to be able to
reset that bar.
That out. Yeah. But a reset would actually be pretty restrictive, because you can't really go back on that, right? You've reset the progress, and now everything that happened before that reset is excluded, and oops scenarios are damaging. And we didn't want to put people in that position where they could make a mistake like that. Right. So what we came up with instead is a start and end date that you can choose to set. You don't have to. You can continue to track donations for all time. The life of your form, and everything counts. Or you can set your start and or end date, and that will filter which donations are actually counted in that progress bar towards your goal. So if you get up on the first or something, you can set it to the first of the month at midnight, and then set the end date to the last of the month at 11:59 or something, and it will only show donations made for that time period in the progress bar. Yeah. And I can't understate how important this is for your data collection, because the only way to go month to month like that before was to just create a new form for each month.
Yep.
But if you've got recurring donations going, those would
Yep.
have to be reassigned to the new form or would not count toward that form's goal. So
Right.
this saves you from having to do that and either losing those renewals towards your
Mhm.
goal progress each month
Mhm.
or having to make those adjustments. So, excuse me. Yeah, so it's really important in order to maintain consistent tracking and your
Mhm.
accountable. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the thing that really sticks out for me with how important this time-based goals change was specifically around Giving Tuesday. So being able to have the same form and just resetting that goal for that day to show what your, whatever your goal is for Giving Tuesday, and then being able to reset it the next day, versus having to create entirely new forms for separate campaigns, makes that just like a little bit simpler. And like you said, if you're pushing a recurring donations campaign for Giving Tuesday, then you're set still. You don't have to, transfer them over or reassign them to something else. So that's
Right.
super important. That really sticks out to me as far as time-based goals are. So I think that's a really underrated enhancement that we made. I feel like it's kind of flown on under the radar since we rolled it out, but it is pretty great user experience enhancement. So
Yeah, it's one of my favorite releases from
yeah.
the first half of this year.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I don't know how to get into the next one because I feel like there's been so many changes and updates, but let's talk about the visual donation form builder specifically. So we rolled out the MVP product of the visual donation form builder a year and a half ago or so. And since then, we've been continually improving on that. Just kind of give me a synopsis of the changes that we're making, what our goals are, how we've updated it, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so there are a couple different things going on. We do want to achieve feature parity to the degree that's possible with our older versions of the form editor. We want to make sure that people who depend on certain functionality can continue to depend on that functionality in the newer version. We might not do everything the same way, but part of that process is ensuring that those forms can be migrated to the visual builder without losing any functionality at all. So that everything we do is going to accommodate prior versions. So nothing's going to be a breaking change, right? So we're paying a lot of attention to that and a lot of attention to the experience because there's no point in having a new editor if it's not a better experience.
Yeah, if it's not a better experience, right?
Right. So that's been super important to us. And that's what's driven some of the work that we've been doing. But ultimately, our goal is to have this replace our older version of our form editor. We need to make sure that it is good enough to do that. So that's what we've been working on this year. One of my favorite projects was adding the donation amount descriptions. So for every level of donation that you add to your form, you can add a short description to it. I think the limit's something like 120 characters, just to add a little bit of a context for what that donation might cover at your organization or how it might help. So you can really engage your donors a little bit and convince them to maybe give more than they otherwise would have. And that's another thing where we're trying to be compatible with the earlier versions of our editor without necessarily doing things the exact same way. Because in our older editor, we had different layouts or different templates that would do things. Like some of them would let you add a description that appeared in the same amount, field, and others would have it appear as a tooltip. And just kind of making that a little bit more consistent across the board in our visual form builder is, I think, really key to the experience.
Yeah. So you alluded to moving away from that options-based editor and to making the visual donation form builder the default. So I know that we've been making tons of enhancements to the visual donation form builder, which, just for the context, in case anybody's watching and they haven't gotten to play around with visual donation form builder, one, you should. Two, the big changes there are that it's a block builder. It's built kind of off the back of Gutenberg, which is the WordPress standard block editor, and it is significantly more customizable without having to use CSS. So you heard Angela and I talk a little bit about how some of these enhancements we made over the last 6 months are only available for the visual donation form builder, and that is because we are moving towards making that the default editor. So let's chat about why we're making it the default and how we're going to continue to support option-based form editing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really confusing to people to have two different editors for your donation forms, right? Which one do you use and why? Which one is, the newest one? Which one has the better features? Especially with people who are new to Give and just using Give for the first time and trying to set up a donation form. It's like, what is this visual builder? And why am I creating forms in an older editor when there are features over here? It gets to be a difficult experience. But at the same time, we don't want to shut out people who have been using that older editor. I mean, it was great for the time, right?
Right? Yeah.
Right. And you might have custom code associated with it. You might have workflows and automations set up that are dependent on that. Those are really hard and take a lot of time to move over. So I'm talking about not just migrating forms within the Give interface, which should be easy and is something that we're accounting for, but all of the things that you've done on your end that might be dependent on those forms, we don't want to just yank that away from you and force you to have to adapt quickly. We know that like nonprofit organizations, maybe you don't have as many volunteer hours, or you don't have as much budget to pay your developer or something like that. So the protections we're putting in place for people who still use those forms, either haven't moved over or can't move over, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to do so. And we want to continue giving you a route to both edit those forms and, if you absolutely have to create new ones using that editor. We're not going to force you into the visual builder. Instead, we're just making it the default path. So when you just click an add form button, or when someone new completes our onboarding, then they will be creating a form that uses the visual builder. But we will, be providing paths through legacy screens and things like that. You can continue to use that older editor.
Yeah. Do you see a time in the future, and you can tell me that you don't feel comfortable answering this question if you want to, but do you foresee a time in the future, probably very far off in the future, but a time in the future where we no longer have an options-based editor at all, or not quite?
Yes. So I do see that coming in the future. I don't have an ETA. I know people want to know, when is this going away? And the answer is basically when you don't need it anymore.
Yeah. When more people are using visual donation form builder than they are using options-based form builder.
Right. And we've kicked around a couple different ways to do that. Do we still keep the older editor within the Give core interface, or maybe split it out into its own add-on? So if you've ever used the classic editor plugin for WordPress, which is still wildly popular, we were considering doing something along those lines, but no promises. Don't quote me on this. We haven't made a hard decision to create an add-on for that yet, but we're just looking.
We're waffling around on, thinking on, we're just not there yet.
Right. We're looking to see how we can accommodate everybody. We don't want to force people into something that isn't going to work for them, but we're going to be monitoring adoption of the visual builder and wait till it gets to a point where we're not going to be hurting anybody by switching over.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Cool. So some of what we're doing with the visual donation form builder and moving towards that being a default experience plays into the way that we're starting to think about Give as we move into the future, which is kind of a more holistic view of campaigns, of fundraising, of nonprofits. And so we have started work towards this. It gets a little confusing because the name is campaigns, but we're starting to work towards shifting our focus from forms to campaigns. So what does that mean overall? And then we'll kind of get into how that's a benefit.
Yeah, so by campaigns, we're just trying to provide a mechanism that identifies with how people actually raise funds, right? Because typically you don't just create a form and it's just a donation form and you don't have anything else. Typically you have an entire campaign. You might be sharing on social, you're thinking of this as like an overarching concept for the most part. At least that's what we're seeing in our feedback. That's what we're seeing online. That's what we're seeing with competitors. And typically there's a page involved, but even if there's not a page involved, people are tracking donations and donors and things on a campaign level, not just on a form level. And they might be collecting or accepting donations in multiple different ways. They might have an event associated with that campaign. And this concept brings everything together and puts it under that one campaign roof. And provides that extra layer of hierarchy there to help people understand how their fundraising is successful. And so we're trying to help a little bit earlier. We don't want to leave, especially people who are newly creating a fundraising site or a fundraising page. We don't want to leave you out. We don't want to make you have to figure out how you're going to get to the point where you actually need a donation form, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you're speaking to especially new users here and the benefit for them, but for the folks who are already using GiveWP, how are we looking at the benefits for them as we move towards campaigns versus forms?
Yeah, so campaign level reporting will be very handy, especially if you have different forms that are essentially for the same purpose, but that just raise the funds in different ways. We find that our users are already doing this by themselves anyway. Typically, they will have a page that talks about the campaign, adds a video, images, things like that, and maybe has one or more donation forms displayed on that page that are associated with that campaign. They just don't have a way to track that on the back end. So it's all a visual component, and there really isn't structure on the Give side to support. So we're trying to make things better for that as well. So you have to do less manually yourselves.
Yeah, I love that. We talk to a lot of people who their major gripe with Give is reporting. And so moving to that campaign level reporting will solve some things, though. I mean, we're not a data plugin, so I don't know if they'll ever be quite as robust as people want, but it does solve for some of those like pains that people are feeling, especially as they're growing, to have that campaign level reporting.
Yeah, and there's a lot we need to do with reporting as well, but this is just one piece of it, one way we can help people out and take a little bit of work off your plate.
Yeah, absolutely. So with campaigns, users will be able to design, launch, and engage folks a little bit better within that campaign functionality. And I know it's something that we're still like in the early days of, but can you give me like an overview of like the capabilities that folks will have within campaigns?
Yeah, so if anybody's a user of our peer-to-peer add-on, kind of understand how this is going to work a little bit. It won't be exactly the same, but when you create a campaign, you can also have that create a landing page for you that will house all the information from your campaign and display that to donors. You'll have a form associated with your campaign that you can start collecting donations. And some of the best features that we have planned, one of my favorites is the campaign updates. So you're used to having, the title, the header image, descriptions, your form, standard things like that. But this would provide a way for campaign organizers to stay in touch and re-engage donors or prospective donors by adding updates to their campaign page that then send notifications. So let's say you've been collecting donations, you've got people who've already donated, and you're maybe $100 away from your goal, and you run a campaign update saying, "Hey, great, thanks guys, we're just $100 away from this goal." That can be very motivational. People who've already given will come back, say something like, "If only 5 people gave $20, we'd be," I've seen that so
reach our goal.
And this gives you a way to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I normally hold all chat questions off until the end, but I happen to think that this fits in pretty seamlessly right now. So Devin said that he would like to see thank you pages versus, how it pops up within the form right now, kind of as a receipt/thank you. Is that something that we think we'll be able to do with campaigns, or is there something like, are there thoughts around that?
we're doing that before campaigns. That's
Look
really
at that, Devin. Angela just out here being saving grace.
Yeah, we've seen that request a lot. It's much better for tracking. We can easily do that. We're providing a setting option inside the form, so you can do this on a per form basis, because we understand, like, sometimes if you have a form that pops up in a modal or something like that, you might be more interested in maintaining the user experience than tracking that one specifically. So you can choose. You'll be able to choose whether it appears within the modal or whether it appears or like within the form.
Separate URL or whatever, right? Yeah,
because a lot of people don't know this, but we actually do have a URL for the confirmation already. It's built to show within the same frame.
Right, so it's just built within there.
Yeah, and we're looking at adding the ability to customize that page a little bit better as well, so you have a little more control over what shows up on that page. Just as long as it still shows the receipt, should be good.
Perfect. Love that. Excellent. Is there anything else around campaigns that you want to like touch on before we move on to the next little chunk of information here?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty straightforward, and I really feel that a lot of people will be saying about time.
Yeah, probably. Thankfully. Right. Thank goodness, Give. So the very last thing that I want to talk about, kind of about what's coming, is something that I'm not sure that we've really settled on yet, which is bulk migration of forms. And so right now, and we're talking, when we're talking bulk migration, we're talking bulk migration to the visual donation form builder. Yeah. And so right now we singularly migrate.
Yep, that's right. So right now you can migrate a single form to the visual builder. It migrates all the functionality from that form over. But some people have a lot more than just maybe a handful of forms. Right. Yeah, so we've gotten this request from a couple of our bigger users who maybe have hundreds of forms. I'm not entirely sure why they have hundreds of forms, because I don't know what they're using them for. But I'm super interested in learning about that, because we do have some data tracking for sites who have opted into allowing us to see some of the ways they use our product. And we see that the average is about maybe 2 or 3 forms per site. All this data is aggregated and anonymized, so we can't really gain a lot of insight from that. But what that tells me,
we don't get to go, oh, there's 2 or 3 forms on this site, let's go look at that site and see what they're using them for. We don't get that information.
It's more like, there are X number of sites opted into sharing data with us, and of those sites, they're X number of forms. So I can't even see which
on average it's right.
Yeah, so like that's what I have to work with, but it kind of indicates that most of our users only have a couple forms, and doing a bulk update feature, it would actually require a significant amount of development, and would really only benefit a few users. And I don't really have a lot of context for how they're using their forms or what they would need out of a migration. And we have our customer feedback forum where we collect that information. And I would love anyone who sees this to go to that feedback forum and maybe jump in on that thread and provide more context for me or more support for that feature. And then I can get it prioritized. But right now, when you've got 1 or 2 people asking for it, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to say, okay, we're going to spend a couple sprints, building a bulk migration form for 2 people to use once. And then it doesn't benefit anyone ever after that.
Yeah, I know. Well, so I put the feedback link in the chat, but the first thing that comes to mind for me about these folks who have a significant number of forms compared to our average 2 or 3 is, for example, we have that pig sanctuary that uses our forms, and the way that they have it set up is that you can sponsor a pig. So there's an individual form for each, and it's not just pigs, for each animal at their animal sanctuary. And so they probably have 30 or 40 forms at any given time. So that's the first kind of thing that pops into my head, is like that sponsorship angle, or things like, I don't know, you're a community center and you're fundraising for back to school, you're fundraising for tutoring, you're fundraising for meals, you're fundraising for school supplies, and then so you have a bunch of forms for each individual thing that you're fundraising for. But yeah, I mean, I can see how it's tricky because it's like you want to make you don't want anyone to spend hours and hours and hours migrating their forms.
Right. I don't want to make people do that.
Exactly. But at the same time, it's like, wow, that's like 9 weeks of work.
Right. And then, and then it gets used once or twice and then never used again. And it's really, it's a hard one. Basically I'm saying, give me a reason to build this.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind too, and we're talking about things like this, is that in order to build that, we have to let something else go for the time being.
Exactly.
So we could build bulk migration, but we might not be able to then build impact donation amounts or funds or something like that, right? So I love when we get to talk about road mapping, because I feel like it kind of gives people an inside look at like how these decisions are getting made and what goes into it, and why sometimes we can't do things, because it's like, well, we can do this eventually, but that means we're not going to get XYZ. And that's really tricky too.
Yeah, exactly. Because it doesn't just boil down to how many people am I building for versus how many dev hours it takes. Right. It's the sacrifice there. It's the trade-off. What are we missing out on? What are we missing out on building?
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, both you and I can agree that we want to give the best possible product for every single person that uses it. And so sometimes there's a trade-off there.
Definitely. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned impact donations and the fact that people may be using so many forms to build a sort of like animal sponsorship or something like that, because that we haven't fully scoped it out yet. So I'm not about that either, but that actually might reduce the need for using so many different forms for different things. So it might accommodate that need a little bit better. So I'm super excited about the prospect of that as well.
Yeah, same. Okay, so we don't have a ton of questions. If anyone has questions that they haven't asked, please put them in the chat. We're happy to answer them now. I asked the one question about the URL redirect, so we're good there. The other question that we have is back to goals. So this person wants to know if we have any plans to change the way that you can visually display your progress bar. So a bar or a table or a pie chart or something like that. Is there anything in the works, or is it just most people want a bar, so we're going to stick with it? Or any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so we don't have anything scheduled for this year. That's something that may come up in the future, especially as we add campaigns with the ability to create their own landing page and everything. That gives us a little more room to play, especially with things that require different styling. But we also find that a lot of people need different things. Yeah. So which types of goal bar would we style? I think the most common one is like a thermometer.
Yep.
Goal bar. And it can be really hard to fit different things on the form, different styles of goal bar on the form. Because at the end of the day, you're working with this small space that has to look right on mobile, right? Because that's how people are giving. Mobile giving is huge. So there's donation form on mobile, and that's why coming out with campaigns is going to be really key, because it gives us a lot more room to play with things like that.
It gives just a little bit of extra space. I think it's just, when we're talking about mobile donations, it's just so important to think mobile first when we're talking about these changes that we're making, and also when you guys are making requests. I know it's so easy to be like, oh, I want this, I want this, I want that, but we really do need to be in a mobile first mindset, because even last year on Giving Tuesday, just for Give users, we saw like 150% increase in mobile giving, and also through mobile payments like Venmo and Apple Pay. So it is really, really important. So I like that you said that, because I always like to give a good reminder that mobile first is so important right now.
Yeah, and the visual builder also gives people a lot easier ways to add their own CSS and custom styling, and third-party developers to add their own and manipulate things as well. So we hope that the community, you know, we're opening that up to them basically to add what you want, especially since we get a lot of different requests for different types of gold bars, and it becomes a okay, which ones do we build
Yeah.
situation. Like
Yeah,
it's a lot easier to just style your own, you know, make a thermometer background and
yeah, figure it out. Absolutely. Okay. Well, if y'all have any other questions and you're in the Facebook group, add them there. Angela and I are always kind of keeping an eye on it, as well as some people from our technical support team and our customer success team. So, and we have a great community of people who use Give day to day, who are also happy to answer questions in there. The last thing that I want to say before I go is right now it is stellar sales. So if you have a plan with us and you want to upgrade, now I promise you is the time, 40% off. If you don't have a plan, also still the time, 40% off. So just make sure you keep an eye on that. Angela, thank you so much for coming on. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks, Camber.
All right. I'll see y'all on the other side. Bye.